My name is Michael Ewing. I am, for this purpose, I am a curator, creative. But right now, man, I am just an individual who is deeply curious in the art and practice of Danielle Myers, a colleague, a friend of mine. So I think it's amazing. We're in the grass, we're doing a grounding activity. So maybe we'll open the breathing exercise, which is called the 4-7-8. So I'm gonna have Danielle do this with me. So the 4-7-8 is you're gonna breathe in for 4, hold for 7. We're gonna breathe out for 8. We do that 3 times, and on the third one, you do what we call a long tone. Whatever sound comes out of your body, we do that, and I think that'd be a good way to start this conversation. It's good with you?
It's good with me, Mike.
Let's start now. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. Breathe out. Breathe in. Hold. 6, 7. Breathe out. It's the last time, but this time we breathe out. Remember, make that long tone. Breathe in. 2, 3. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Breathe out. There we go. So, Danielle, let's go back. I think before, you'll be the first in the series that I do with these conversations. I always open it up by saying, I don't ask the artist what they're working on, I ask them what they're looking at. So to come up with this project, what were you looking at? What inspired this? What was the inspiration behind this in particular?
Well, I'll tell you what I'm looking at right now. I'm looking at ambiguous grief right now.
Ambiguous grief.
Ambiguous grief. So ambiguous grief is grief that is not aligned with death. So like no contact relationships, immigration, maybe you lost your pet and like it ran away or something. And so anything that's not dealing with, specifically dealing with death, is a form of ambiguous grief. For this particular project, though, I was kind of analyzing the fact that all of my work was human-centered, and trying to figure out a way to do something that focused on a different species. And so when I started thinking about pollinators, I was like, how can I integrate my type of work with putting them first and then us second? And flowers is what I started looking at and coming up with, and how I could integrate wildflowers back into their native land. So I looked up what type of species of wildflowers grew in this area and kind of honed in from there. Found a medley of seed from this one company. And that's how this project kind of came to be.
Wow. So go back. The term ambiguous grief, right?
Yeah.
What made you stumble upon that? Was that something that was already a part of your vernacular, or was it something you were studying, or did somebody introduce you to that term? How did that come into your vantage point?
It came into my vantage point because I feel like I grieve the living more than I do the dead. There are a lot of people in my life that I feel like I have to love from afar.
Okay.
And so I was trying to find the vernacular that went with that. And once I found it, that's what my research has been as of late. And I guess with this particular project, if you think about like grief and flowers, those usually go hand in hand. But it's something that I'm more focused on now than any point in my life, is like, how do you love somebody from a distance? What are the type of what type of restraint does that take to not reach out to somebody that you really care about? Because of either them hurting you or you hurting them, or a combination of both. And so I'm trying to, right now I'm looking at medical journals and psychology journals to see if there's a parallel between what ambiguous grief does to the psyche versus what grieving somebody that you lost physically has done to the psyche.
Okay, so wow. So you're looking at the idea, one, something beyond human, right? Coming from your design background, which is, when you think about human-centered design, to your point, is always human-centered. You wanted to kind of navigate and put nature in the center of the conversation, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, I wanted to give pollinators a place for rest, refuge, as a food source. And like from a distance, you can't really see that these are letters. This just looks like a patch of overgrown grass until you kind of come a little bit further up on it. And so I just wanted to provide a place for bees and flies and like butterflies to come, and I like being around bugs. Like I like being around small microcosms. And I spend a lot of time here just kind of walking around barefoot because I feel like I'm being a part of something that it makes me think of how small I actually am in comparison to everything.
I love that. And for anybody that's listening right now, me and Danielle are kind of walking through the letters, through the space. And what's interesting, it does feel maze-like, even though you can walk around, you kind of honor it. And these colors are violets and reds and a lot of vegetation, a lot of different species of weeds mixed in with beautiful wildflowers. And to Danielle's point, you can articulate the letters when you stand from a distance, but in a way, when you get it kind of disappears or dissipates in a way. You see it more when you stand back. So Danielle, I would love to ask, like, in thinking about this from a theoretical standpoint, we've talked about the vernacular, we've talked about you kind of wanting to create a pollination station for species to come and kind of create like a social space for species to come and gather, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about the labor of doing this and kind of, were there meditative moments around the labor? Did you find yourself reflecting on your ambiguous grief as you were doing this? Or, I'll kind of stop it there because I don't want to feel like I'm feeding you.
Yeah. So,
just wondering that process.
So while you were talking, I was watching a bumblebee jump from flower to flower.
Wow.
But the labor, man, there was a lot of cussing that happened.
Okay.
So I first of all, it took a little while to get the permit to do this piece.
Okay.
And this is the first time that I've ever gardened before. And so I didn't know the process of cutting into the ground. And there's a lot of like crabgrass in this ground that I've learned does not like to let go of its form. And so there was a lot of trial and error. I would say that I didn't really understand what I was doing as far as physicality was concerned until I got to the last letter. But it took days, and I would say probably at least 50 or 60 hours of just cutting into the ground and experimentation of how the seeds would be sown. And some letters are more successful than others, but yeah, it was a labor of love. It was an experimentation process. And so now I know what I'm doing for future projects or future iterations of this Wildflower Project.
So just to go back a bit, right? We've talked about the labor and what you've learned. If we could just kind of talk about some of the interior emotions that you were feeling beyond kind of the trial and error, were there any things that, not so much going into detail about, were there any things in particular that you felt that came up for you from your interior as you're working on this project that may have surprised you? Or were there any revelations that came in the process of doing this to this point so far?
There was a point where I felt a lot of defeat.
Okay.
Like especially I had laid out the letters, and that was a difficult task in itself. And when I came back the next week, they had all been pulled up. And so there was a point where I was like, damn, is this even worth doing? And then I fixed it, and then I came back again, and somebody had run like trail marks into some of the letters with their tires. And so it was just kind of a process of acceptance and pivoting. And so I would say this is the first project that I was like ready to give up on. And I just kept telling myself that I had to push through in order to see the fruits of my labor come to fruition. But I would say this is probably the most challenging project that I've done because of the level of, like, I guess, for lack of a better word, ignorance that I had as far as the materiality was concerned.
Okay. For those that don't know, Danielle is well known for her letter work, her typography, and she enjoys to travel to different spaces all over the world and take images of different typography fonts, particularly those that are hand painted. So my question to you is that, how does it feel to kind of feel like, when I look at this, I think about you're collaborating with nature. So yeah, there's these like really beautiful points of, like, one, I guess the first question was, is this a particular font style? And is that font style still have the integrity of like what it normally originally is? Or has it shifted because of just the way the nature has grown the way it wants to grow?
Well, this is a particular font style. So this is called the sans serif type.
Okay.
It's most known for like being contemporary or modern typeface. I did hand letter this piece.
Okay.
And so there isn't a particular font that you're going to be able to find that mimics this. But I would say that the biggest thing that I learned in this process is like the depth of the letters. I had 2 TSU students that helped, and also my daughter Ella came and helped with digging. And there's definitely a difference between the letters right next to each other, like this A and this D that's right here in the word lead. Just the depth and knowing that how deep I need to go into the ground is actually just skimming the surface for the flowers to grow. Because once you start messing up with the layers of the soil, it kind of becomes a cumbersome situation for the plants to regenerate or be able to pop up. And so, long story short, this is a typeface, but it is one that has culminated myself.
Wow. And just for y'all to know, you never have to make story short. We have time, you know. but just like what I can say to anyone listening, which I think is really beautiful, is me and Danielle were working on a project, and I remember when this was an idea, she was showing me early ideas of what it was projected to be. But there is something that is poetic about walking through this. One, because, you know, I think Danielle kind of spoke to this. It's been an overwhelming time. And so there's something very meditative about walking through this amazing organic form of this phrase, right? And so for those who don't know what it says, what made you choose the phrases here? And can you say what the phrase is here?
Yeah, so the phrase is lead with love. It was originally going to be what you water grows. But I recently did this piece called what is it that I have at the perch that says it, Free Your Genius. So I have this Free Your Genius perch at Fisk University, which is a bench in itself. And I was walking by a bench the other day and trying to figure out if I really wanted to have what you water grows be the text for this.
Yeah.
And on the bench there was this sticky note that said lead with love. And I took it as a sign to pivot from what you water grows to lead with love, especially because lead with love is a passage from the Bible. And I feel like since we are in the South, and we are in the Bible Belt, that it felt like it was meant to be for this space. And people that kind of walked past or while I've been out here either mowing or sowing the seeds, and they find out what it means, that they'll tell me stories about like hearing that in gospel. And it felt like it was like a religious intervention for me. So I took the lead and let that be the text for this piece.
How has that been, right? You talked about when you're working on something that is in nature, right? Sometimes you have the ability to work in your studio, in your home, when you're doing your hand typography or lettering. But this, we're at Hadley Park, which is a very social space. Those who don't know, there's a Hadley center behind Hadley Park. There's this place where people can walk and engage. And just about 200 feet, there's kind of a outdoor theater space. And so people are always engaging. What was kind of one of the highlights, or maybe an encounter that you had while working on this project with just a community member or just a pedestrian walking past that stands out in your mind?
There was a guy that was asking what I was doing.
Okay.
And at first he was kind of disappointed that I wasn't sowing food. But then he saw like me cutting into the ground and noticed the patterns and was like, what is this? And so I explained the project to him, and I explained what the messaging was. And he was like, I just want to let you know that I walked over here to let you know that God's going to bless you. And those aren't words that are usually said to me.
Wow.
And so that was a moment of like, it took me aback. I had to put pause for that for a little bit and sit with it. And he just went on about his day. And I don't think I saw him again since I've done this project.
Wow. That's beautiful. So, without leaving the present moment of what this project is, now that you've been able to kind of navigate how to do this project, or how to collaborate with land, or collaborate with agriculture in the way that you have, I guess my first question is, do you approach this project kind of like a street artist or a muralist? When it grows, you don't care what happens to it after? Is it around capturing and documenting the process, and then whatever happens, happens? Or is there a long-term legacy for this particular site? Or do you have a plan for the future of what you want to do with the Wild Seed Project as a whole?
For this particular iteration, it was about proof of concept.
Okay.
This project comes down July 31st.
Okay.
But I will say that for me, it was like once I sowed the seeds and I could see them start to come up from the ground, whatever happened from that point on was just nature taking over.
Okay.
For the future iterations of this project, I would like to have these on college campuses and work with undergraduate students to come up with the messaging and like what it looks like in the future.
Okay.
I could see replacing the grass that we're walking on with either moss or some sort of like fine pebble, so that people can have this long term. And the cool thing about wildflowers is like they will grow in place. So as they die, then the seeds will go back into the ground, and then the next season they will replenish. And then I would also like to have projects like this on the side or on the embankments of highways. It's such an underutilized and wasted space that I think having a messaging that people can see from a faraway perspective, I guess it wouldn't be an aerial perspective, but they would be able to see it while driving, and then it would be a place for pollinators to be by themselves and not interrupted by humans.
I want to share something with you that I think is interesting. It just came to me as I walked this. So probably in 2021, I was in a very healing space in my life. I was living in Texas, and in my family, for the last 100 years, we've had about 40 acres of land. And in the springtime, these amazing wildflowers grow on our land. And so by a gentleman titled Man Heal Thyself. And it was talking about the idea of like taking these hydro baths. So basically taking a hot bath at least once a week. And it became a part of my practice. But what I found was I had to make my bath. It talked about in the book around creating rituals around the things that you do. And so one of the things that was really interesting to me was I started to see these beautiful wildflowers that, because on my land they cut it down for hay, they would just get chopped down. But it would kind of be almost a violence that kind of spread them throughout the land in a weird way. And so what I started to do was on Sundays, which is so, it's poetic that it's Sunday, y'all.
Yeah.
If you don't know, it's Sunday. I would pick these wildflowers and I would make bath solutions for my bath. So I would take wildflowers, I would take Himalayan salt, I would take oatmeal, and I would do it as a meditative practice to create these bath solutions for my baths on Sundays is when I would take these hot soaking baths. But it was something beautiful because I would go out with a plastic bag and a small thing of scissors, and I would cut along the highway, on my land, walking to the land, I would cut these flowers that I would put into my bath. And so it's interesting because I think I'm going to ask you as a collaboration or maybe as an iteration, before you have to kind of cut this down, I would love to take these flowers and create some of those bath solutions that I have that people can have. So it's a way that they can kind of, sit with the flowers in a beautiful way. And my landlord probably didn't like that because the flowers would get stuck in the...
You just have to use a strainer, right?
Yeah, I have to use a strainer. You're right. I wasn't there. But I just bring that up to say, in a weird way, this project takes me back to East Texas. Mm-hmm. These wildflowers, in the way that they are formed, I don't know, if you're able to come and visit this project, you forget that you're in North Nashville. Not in the sense of North Nashville because it's not a place to be, but North Nashville as an urban space. There's a weird kind of almost rural departure when you're walking amongst these flowers that make you forget that you're around so many concrete buildings and homes, and there's a highway that cut right through Jefferson Street, just a few yards away. And so it's really powerful to kind of be transported. And in a way, you're taking me back to the nature place that I think of in East Texas. I wonder for you, is there any place where you grew up or you lived that had a lot of vegetation or pollination that was happening in any of the cities that you lived in throughout your life that maybe this takes you to or reminds you of?
No, I wouldn't say. Well, actually, no, that's not true. My great aunt used to have a small piece of property on the Nantahala River, which is in the, it's like near Asheville, Cherokee Mountains area.
Okay.
And so we would go there once a year.
Okay.
And spend time on the Nantahala River. And most of the land there was like not manicured. Mm-hmm. And there were a lot of wildflowers that would just pop up there. And so I would say that particular place. But when I did live in Texas, I lived over a nature preserve. And so I think that's where I started waking up super early, because I would watch the coyote run in the morning and then the boar forage at night. And so I've always had this like affinity for nature and affinity for the things that people really don't see as precious. I mean, I know people see flowers as precious, but people don't spend a lot of time with wildflowers. Mm-hmm. They spend a lot of time with bouquets or flowers that are in the supermarket, but they don't spend a lot of time with the free shit. Mm-hmm. And so I just want people to like see the beauty that's around them. And I think that letters or language pulls people in a way that some other mediums cannot. Okay. Because they're trying to read what this says.
Do you think, so going back to one, it's been so many kind of poetic strings I could pull from. One, just the idea when you said, when I was sowing the seeds, right? And I think that goes back to very like biblical moments, right? We always think about, harvest and seeds and planting seeds, and just something that I think people use even just in common vernacular. I think that has transcended beyond just the religious, kind of a realm, but it's like using everyday language. But then also kind of the phrase, right? Even you find this on a sticky note. As this project grows, is there some power in kind of the simplification of the phrases, or you know, being someone who grew up in the church, you know, in poetry, they kind of call these things kind of proverbs. Like this. So when I read this, it feels proverbic, like these very strong but kind of powerful string of words together. And so I'm wondering, is that, I know it's intentional for this project, but as it goes, will the phrases become more complex in your mind, or is there something beautiful around the simplicity but the impact of like minimal language? But
I mean, I am a pithy person, so what that means is like if I can say something in 3 words, but I use 10.
Okay.
But so there's that aspect. But
Okay.
I think that future iterations of this project need to be collaborative. Like
Okay.
I'm not from North Nashville, right? So this was a project that I wanted to do on my own, specifically just to test out.
Right.
But for future like iterations of and entering into communities or being invited into communities, I definitely want there to be what the verbiage is what the language people wanted to say.
Yeah.
And then going back to what you said about like, I don't know if you know that I was actually a preacher when I was a kid.
I didn't know that.
So from like 8 to 10, I had a congregation of like 20 kids.
Okay.
In my grandfather's front yard. And so like preaching or the notion of giving sermons and language is something that is embedded in me.
Okay.
It's not something that I practice anymore.
Right.
But yeah, I just think that this is something that there's layers to this project. And I think that this was a way for me to get back to God in a way.
Mm-hmm. Ooh.
And so, yeah, I think that that's what this project is for me, or at least this iteration.
I was talking to Danielle earlier this week. I was reading this book. It was an old book around community design, and it was a phrase in there. I think 2 theologians and sociologists, and they were both speaking from the Judeo-Christian context, and they were talking about nature, and one was talking about the idea, I believe his name is John Black, was talking about the idea of like dominion, and how, you know, we have dominion over the earth. So we can do whatever we want to earth, right? And the other kind of sociologist was talking about this idea of stewardship, that in fact, we are the trusted landlords of this earth. And that we have to keep up. And so as I think about, I bring that up, Danielle, because I was telling you, as I think about this project, there's this beautiful balance between this ideal of dominion and this idea of stewardship, because the dominion is, you're actually kind of carving in a beautiful way, kind of the way that these wildflowers will grow and creating the lettering. But the stewardship is like coming and trimming and maintaining the form that has been created. And in many ways, you know, organically grows the way it is. I just want to throw those 2 words out there for you and just wonder, what is your relationship when you hear the word dominion or you hear the word stewardship?
I don't like to think that I have dominion over anything.
Okay.
I prefer, I mean, I understand that notion,
Yeah.
but like,
No,
I
definitely.
definitely want to be just a conduit for the
Okay.
land itself. But in that same conversation that you and I had earlier this week, you said you do realize that you're starting to have conversations with nature. Like that's what your focus is right now.
Right.
And I remember writing that down because I hadn't thought of it that way. But I like the idea of just being in conversation and listening and reacting to that or responding to that listening. Because like there was a time where, and it's still, you can see where the L and part of the W here was singed. And so I had to respond to give the land more water than it was receiving. And so I'm just trying to be here as like a conduit of what this project needs and this not be about me.
Okay. And now I'm gonna throw it back at you a little bit.
Okay.
In the project, right, one is beautiful. I love how, again, like we said, we're kind of shifting the connotation of dominion, not just like, oh, I am over this thing, but more of like, I'm a conduit.
Yeah.
Right. And as you were speaking, I thought of like James Baldwin when he talks about the idea of like bearing witness, that you're witnessing and you're experiencing it, alongside with nature. Y'all are figuring this out together. It is really a mutualistic conversation and collaboration.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say my push, but my kind of pivot a little bit is that though this is not about you, right? This is happening through you. So what is happening through you as you are strategizing and saying this, if we just take the poetics of this W needs more water, but this other letter is full.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find are there any parallels in your life that you're finding like, I need to water this portion of what's happening, but man, this space is really good, or this is really healthy, or even a fragment within a fragment of that, like this part of the W is really beautiful, but this part isn't. In it not being about you, but being able to maybe personify or put yourself into the place of this nature that you're stewarding. Do you feel that? Do you feel this interconnectedness with your own internal toils or your own internal growths and waterings as you're navigating this ambiguous grief? That's kind of the overarching theme of this whole project.
Yeah, I would say this project has taught me a lot. It's taught me to be patient.
Okay.
In a way that I wasn't expecting it to kind of kick me in the face with.
Okay.
And then the other portion is like, nature's going to grow how it grows, right? And so I can't control everything in my life.
Right.
Like, I can plant the seeds, I can water them to the best of my ability, I can protect them as much as I can. But there's going to be birds and other things that come and fuck shit up. Like, it's just going to come in and do what it does. And so I can only control so many aspects of my life. There are other entities that are in my life that are going to have control as well. Mm-hmm. And I have to either let them be, mm-hmm. or I can say, oh, this needs more work, this needs more watering. But these flowers, like, they grew how they grew. And mm-hmm. I placed them as I wanted to place them. But then when I came back the next week, I could see birds come in. And it was just a situation where I had to accept what I could not change in this project.
Acceptance, it seems like a theme that's a word that's coming up. Acceptance, learning, I guess I would love to maybe end it with an observation. Mm-hmm. Have people in your inner circle, your family, your friends, whoever, have they noticed any noticeable change since you've been working on this project? I know right now you're in the midst of grad school, right, the MFA program. I know that you work with Vanderbilt, with EADJ, you're around your daughter, your partner. Like, have you had any insights or any, like, curiosities or comments from people around you that have observed any differences as you've been working on this project in any way?
Yeah, I would say due to some personal shifts in my life as of late. This project has really taught me to just getting back to the idea of acceptance, like accepting that I can't change certain people, I can't change certain things. Doesn't matter how much you water. You can overwater things, and you can drown things if you try to overwater them. And so, giving things what they need, but without depleting yourself, without running yourself dry. I would say that's probably the biggest takeaway that I've either heard or have seen in myself since I started this project, 8 weeks ago?
Okay. 8 weeks ago. And then today is a really extraordinary day too. For those that don't know, Danielle has been doing a ritualistic running ritual every morning or various times of the day, guaranteeing that she does at least a mile a day. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Consecutively, and today is 365 days, which is almost poetic in itself because you think about the number of days in a year, and that is kind of the full spectrum of all of the seasons of sorts. Just to take a moment to celebrate that and be in that, because I think in this project there's some rituals that come up with just maintaining this. If we pivot a little bit, how has that ritual, and to look back retrospectively over the 364 days, being in 365 now, how has that impacted your life? Um,
I mean, so I started running. My mentor, my friend David John Walker, has been running for like 3 years straight. And I talked to him about it. And what I gathered was like, it's brought more consistency in his life. And so I told myself that if I can do something that I hate, because I loathe running. It is the dumbest thing I've ever done. But through that process of doing something that I hate every day, I've been more consistent with doing the things that I love every day. And so now I don't hate running as much. I will say that. My body actually craves it, and it's been a replacement for me for other methods of coping.
Okay.
And so it's just brought a ton of consistency in other areas that I lacked focus in.
Right. Wow. It's beautiful. Well, I guess the closing question I have for you is a odd question I ask people all the time. If you were to summarize over these last 8 weeks your emotions, your experiences in 2 colors and 2 textures, what would those two colors and 2 textures be as it pertains to this Wildflower Project?
I would say the first color is like, I would say it's probably like a navy blue, the first color. There was a lot of sorrow in the first couple weeks of this project. Now I would say it's more lavender. Like there's acceptance, but there's still a level of like melancholy with it.
Okay.
As far as textures are concerned.
Yeah, talk to me.
The first texture was more like, I would say almost like buckwheat. Like it was soft, but it was rough at the same time.
Okay.
And now it's like the texture of petals, like walking around, seeing these flowers bloom. Some of them are perfect. Some of them are marred. Some of them are eaten. But if you touch all of them, they still have the same feeling. And I love all of them the same, like whether they're perfect, imperfect, sprouting, completely bloomed. So yeah, it's like the feeling of a petal.
Wow. Well, my name is Michael Ewing. It is June 29th.
June 30th.
Sorry, June 30th. Thank you for the correction. It is 6:11 p.m. Sunday. We are in North Nashville, in historic Hadley Park. I'm here with Danielle Myers, artist, practitioner, mother, friend, creative, and now curator of pollination, which is, if I were in this to let anyone know that's listening to this, what is so beautiful is the cherry on top is as me and Danielle are kind of walking in these almost circles around each other as we walk through. She has these beautiful, now what I call her signature shades, which are kind of a hard plastic, almost acrylic hearts, 2 continuous hearts next to each other that create the lenses of the shades. And I think it is so in line with the phrase lead with love, because literally her frames, which sit in front of her eyes, which lead you through the daily activities, are designed out of these beautiful hearts. And so thank you so much for your time, for your vulnerability in this project and expressing it. And for anyone that may be listening, please stay engaged with this project. For those who are interested in this project growing, what I really like is that for this project to grow beyond conceptual, the proof of concept, it will take deep collaborations. That could be writers, that could be activists, that could be everyday people that are just wanting to put certain proverbic words or phrases in their community. So please reach out. And there's a very scientific aspect about it around really Danielle, as she spoke about earlier, really kind of looking up the exact species of flowers, wildflowers that would have grown in this particular community, in this particular geographical location. And so what this project will be in different cities, in different countries, will look drastically different because it will speak to the agricultural memory or historical memory, the horticulture of the places that she goes and she travels. And so, Danielle, I hope that this is, yes, an amazing proof of concept, but I hope that this is only the beginning of what this project is going to unfold into. So thank you for your time.
I appreciate your time, Mike.
Thank you for listening to the conversation between Michael Ewing and myself. My name is Danielle Myers. I am the creator of the project. Before we go, I wanted to say a couple thank yous to individuals that really helped this project come to fruition. Metro Parks gave me the permit and the agency to cut letters into the ground in a way that they hadn't seen before, and so I appreciate them for allowing me to do this. The people of Hadley Park, the staff, the community members, the volunteers, all were super welcoming and engaged with the project from beginning to end. TSU students Jamari Shelton and Curtis Green, they came out on a Saturday morning and helped me cut letters into the ground. My brilliant, beautiful daughter, Danielle Myers, she came and she was a measuring stick at one point. She helped me cut letters into the ground. She helped me lay the letters into the ground. And so I am truly indebted to her in this project because without her, I wouldn't have been able to do this. And then another huge person that I am indebted to is Dr. Maria Magdalena Campos Pons, also known as Magda for most people. She is the founder of the Engine for Our Democracy and Justice at Vanderbilt University, also known as EADJ. She saw this project when I was sketching it out and believed in it and allowed me to create this as one of our spring programs for EADJ. And lastly, Michael Ewing, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. Mike is one of my closest friends. He is a brilliant creative, he is a brilliant curator, and he's a brilliant community member. And so if you've made it this long, thank you for listening, and I hope you have been able to engage with the project. If you haven't been able to, we will have pictures posted soon.